thrilled to be with everyone. Please, there's no dumb questions, so do ask your questions. And in previous data dialogues, the things I've been impressed with is just the amount of questions we've got. So if we get a large list, we'll even change the program a little bit from the 5 questions that I've come up for Ellen and Julie. Ellen, you want to provide a little introduction to yourself and what you typically are working on at Elation?
Absolutely. I'm Ellen Hudson Snyder. I'm on the professional services team here in Elation, and I have worked with many of our customers in getting them up and running with their data catalog program, and helping to derive business benefit from the catalog. I've been with Elation for nearly 6.5 years, and so we've seen the evolution of the catalog over that time, and it's been a great journey.
That makes Ellen a long timer at Elation, so cool. And Julie, we can talk data models and all kinds of things together. Can you tell the crew here a little bit about yourself?
Certainly. I'm Julie Smith. I'm Director of Data and Analytics at Elation, which means I'm actually the person who probably a lot of our attendees is actually in Elation, looking after our provision for our own Elationnauts and how they can get their data. I joined Elation back in May last year. Prior to that, I was a customer of Elation, so I was already sold on the concept there. But I've worked with data for many years. I was a consultant for a period of time, so I've seen many different industries and organisations trying to get to grips with self-service BI and similar. So yeah, and it'd be interesting to hear some of the questions that people have. Perfect.
Well, self-service has been a discussion for a long time, and obviously it's an area that people are trying to seek. And, I was surprised when I asked CIOs a while back when they said, hey, first thing you need to do this is a catalog. But, you guys are in the trenches working with folks in terms of trying to deliver on the promise here. So I'm going to start with you, Ellen. When you get in and start working with customers and they tell you their goal is self-service, what's the biggest challenges that you see them facing?
So in general, on the post-sales side, the challenges that customers run into in getting started with self-service, well, there are a number of challenges that they may run into. However, one of the things that we see in implementations is defining an appropriate scope to get started. Okay. It is very easy to want to take on a lot and build a catalog that immediately meets the needs of your entire enterprise. However, it's important when you're bringing on a new tool like Elation to build out these new business capabilities and affect change, to start small, build for success with that small implementation, iterate, expand to be able to expand on that success. So early successes are important. Defining an appropriate scope is important, and determining your priorities for that.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many times I've heard CIOs say, go get a quick win, 90 days or something like that, show the value, and then build out the rest of the pieces. So that's great. Julie, from your perspective, a lot of people think of self-service as being a tool, like to build reports and things like that. Are you seeing that people need to move faster and make decisions faster, so they need to get at data faster? What are you seeing is in the market happening?
I think, yeah, people want answers. Well, the whole world's moving faster. And I can hark back to good, not so long, what seems like not so long ago to me, but when I actually look at the calendar, it was a very long time ago. And the speed and the pace of delivery of information and everything, people want the answers yesterday. And so yeah, the technology has sort of had to evolve in that way, but also the sort of human interaction with it and who's actually facilitating that to get that information out there. That's very key to me, is how the cultural aspect of it, the human aspect in place. Because as you say, it's not just people think of self-service BI, they might very much focus on the tool set they're going to use to do that. Or should I say the tool sets, because I don't think one size ever fits all. And they forget about that human and the change management and getting the people to build it. And as I think I've probably said once, and I'll say it again, just because you build it doesn't mean they're going to come.
That's
Yeah.
very thought. And it happens more often than you'd like. Coming back to you, Julie, you've been involved in getting these things started at organizations like many of the folks that are online right now. How important is it to get that executive sponsorship early on in the process? Very.
I think it helps you. We're harking back to what Ellen was saying in terms of the incremental approach and getting that area that's going to be of actually key value, helping them to identify that with you, helping get the buy-in, the resources, because you're going to need time from people, for quite a range of people to do this. And there is the cultural change as well to get people to come and do this and use this information and be data driven. So to get that time from them, to get the direction where you're going to get as much for your investment as you can and impress people so you can get onto that next phase. I think it is absolutely key to have that completely, yeah. And that's where a lot of people fail, is they just try and do it because isn't it obvious what the benefit of this is? And so trying to do that really sets you up for more likely success.
So Ellen, I've seen a number of different circumstances. I was with one of our favorite customers a while back, and unfortunately in their particular case they didn't have the executive sponsorship and they were trying to do it after implementation. So what do you find? Are most of the customers got that figured out before you start, or what do you see generally?
So in terms of sponsorship, put it this way, the customers that do come in with executive sponsorship do tend to find success much more quickly. The reason for that is because executive sponsorship lets them align resources internally. It lets them get funding, and then they have support and the ability to ask for and get the support for the human resources and the change management resources that they do need. Without that executive sponsorship, it's much more difficult to gain that traction, and because people are not necessarily going to want to change their working habits if they don't see a benefit for that. And sometimes having people pick their heads up and understand what the benefits are, it can be difficult without having some guidance from the executive level. Say, this is what we're doing organizationally. Here's why. Here are our goals, and I need for you all to buy into that.
Yeah, that culture change is such a big issue, and getting people. We were talking about this last week in the event I was running, and we were talking about the fact that you really want the CEO and the rest to say, this is how we make decisions versus gut feel and maybe a report I saw a month ago. How often is that a problem, Julie, where you're really trying to move the organization to making decisions with data, and it's a struggle?
It can vary organisation to organisation what the reasons behind it are. One that was occurring to me as Ellen was speaking there actually was when we talked about the sponsorship to get people to sit and pay attention. Is quite often I suppose what phrase I might use to use it is change fatigue. People are like, yeah, this is like the fourth time people have tried to introduce us to BI and tried to implement this, and XYZ happened, and you don't necessarily know what the failures of the past have been, but trying to get people to buy in again and realize this is it. And people do fight change. People like to keep hold of what they know. I remember this again was when I mentioned the technology, you'll realize how many years ago it was, but I remember a guy fighting tooth and nail not to move to Sybase because it was never, ever going to do what his current Microsoft Access database did. And and I couldn't understand it, and I justified, and I showed him all these things that the BI tool would do for him, and answered all of his questions. And then I learned he'd actually had the same argument that he didn't want to move to Microsoft Access originally from his original tool set. So it was a pattern, because he was an example of somebody who didn't like change, and giving people the tool sets and other things, people will continue as before, and getting them to sit up and realize the benefits and what they can actually do with it. Plus the level of trust in what they're going to get and how they can use it with data. there's people will get their favorite SMEs they'll pick up the phone to, and someone on the BI team, and it's very easy for them to do that. So suggesting that there's another route, and here's how you might go through that as well. So yeah, those are all things that I think it's the human nature. We don't like change, really, on those sides of things, and it's easy to pick up a phone and ask somebody.
Yeah, it is. I'd like to jump in here, circling back to something that we brought up earlier, so that change management is super important. That's also one of the benefits of focusing on a quick win, because when people see success, then they become intrigued with that and they can see the value. If you have something tangible where you can show value, then it's much easier to get people to buy into that change.
Yeah. And that's something that, I'm experiencing. I've experienced it in Elation coming in, and what we're doing and the changes we're doing is we're picking at particular areas and working with them, and we were building it out, because you can't do things big bang in this way. You have to focus on particular areas. It's good to have what I would suggest as a sort of a high level plan in terms of overall, here's what we're going to end up with. But then bite it off a bit at a time with, as you say, tangible, manageable size and scale that you're going to work towards. An analogy I hark back to all the time is you don't want to build things too much in silos away from a grand plan, because you end up with an Apollo 13. Our carbon filters from the lunar module won't fit in the command module because we developed these completely separately. So let's have the high level plan as to ultimately what this is going to look like. But yes, build it in a manageable scope, manageable scale in that area, and yeah, learn from each one, and you'll get a faster acceleration going through the other areas because you've learned and you're proving yourself. You'll have a better uptake because people see that change happening and it being a positive change.
Yeah, there's that great saying from Peter Drucker: culture eats strategy for breakfast. So, with the executive sponsorship, hopefully you can get the help with the people and culture and process issues that go along. So once somebody's done that, Ellen, what are the things that they need to be ready for in terms of knowledge of the domain, so that they're taking on finance or something like that? What things do they need to have ready in order to start that self-service journey? What do you recommend people be able to do?
So in order to start a self-service journey, right, we ideally have people who understand the internal culture at the organization, and then understand what the near-term and long-term goals are, and then have an understanding of the benefits of the catalog. So as we get started bringing customers up to speed with the Elation catalog and implementing it, there's a lot of education that we do to make sure that I call it the catalog leadership team, has a clear understanding of the capabilities of Elation, and we can refine that based on their use cases and specifically what they're trying to do. Okay. With that understanding, and when I do want to talk a little bit about use cases, understanding, how knowing the internal environment is important, or having resources that you can pull on for the internal environment is important. That helps you prioritize the tasks that are necessary. Okay, so from an implementation perspective, understanding the goals, the internal environment, the capabilities of the tool, and what constitutes success, near-term and longer-term success, will help with getting started with that implementation.
Julie, any recommendations you'd have?
No, I think Ellen's spot on there in terms of wanting to have the understanding of what the business strategy is for that area, and having to align that in that way, and what the culture is. It comes back again to the human side of it, making sure you've got that in place. I'd say make sure you've got people, I would recommend involving people from that area as much as you can, so they have a sense of ownership and you've got sort of direct representation, which is another reason why having that sponsorship is important, because you'll want to draw on the resources from that area to help feed what you're doing. And don't assume everyone thinks the way you do. Don't assume everybody's a data person. Don't assume everybody has that same outlook on stuff. You really have to bring empathy into it and understanding of their position and what they're trying to do and how they might think about things. That I think is really quite key. And a mistake I've seen people make in trying to do this because they assume everybody knows what they know.
So to expand on that just a little bit, that's a super important point. There are many different stakeholders and different types of stakeholders in an organization that may be stakeholders in a catalog. Depending on who is managing the catalog and their understanding of the needs of the consumers of the catalog, there can be some learning for the organization, for the catalog management team, to make sure that they understand what are the true pain points and needs of the, I'm going to call them business users, the consumers of the catalog, the contributors of the catalog. Those may be different groups. They may have different needs and different use cases that you're working on implementing.
So it's interesting. There's a new book that I've just done well, it's not come out yet, but I did a review of, and it will come out in a couple of weeks. But it talks about the need for a digital mindset. And one of the things they talk about is the notion that business users need to be educated on data and data issues and how to evaluate data and how to use data and things like that. When, Julie, I'll start with you. When you've worked with organizations before, how do you get people educated on basic data needs and things like that so that they can actually use data as part of their jobs?
Not wishing to repeat myself, but first of all, not one approach is going to suit everybody, because you'll have a wide spectrum of people and their backgrounds and how data literate they already are, how their mind works and similar. Depending upon the different departments, people will be more or less comfortable. But usually in certain departments, you'll find trends like people in finance, incredibly comfortable with numbers, obviously, and therefore data is not such a big leap for them. But other areas, that's not their sort of skills are in a different area. They're maybe more human people, and they will have a different outlook on data. So I would say you've got to think of it as a spectrum of approaches and try and think, well, how can we do this? I would also avoid talking about a need for a digital mindset and things like that, if I'm honest, because for the certain people who aren't necessarily, data minded and things like that, if you start talking to them and say, we're going to take you through a digital mindset training, they'd be like, whoa, and they'll already be shutting themselves down because they'll be thinking, I can't do that. I'm not a maths person. I didn't like maths at school and other things like that. But if you put it in the different terms and explain to them, really, it's just about looking at the business, but looking at what we can find out about it and present this. It's the way you tell them will differ in the different ways, and so have that in mind. Just don't think, right, this is our education schedule, this is exactly what we'll do for everybody. There has to be that spectrum addressed there, I think.
So Ellen, obviously there are data quality issues out there, and we've talked a lot about it from a governance.
Surely not, Miles. No.
And so Ellen, when you work with customers, do you try to get them educated on the issues that can happen with data?
In general, yes, we do. However, oftentimes when we're working with a catalog implementation team, they are already aware that they may have data quality issues, and the catalog can be brought in to help solve some of those issues. For example, it is one of the things that from an education perspective and an understanding perspective, we often see when implementing catalogs in organizations that there may be, for example, people don't have a common vocabulary, or the definition of customer is different in different parts of the organization or for different reports. Those things may be understood prior to the exploration of bringing on a data catalog, or it may be that that information is exposed by bringing on a data catalog. And so from the data perspective, getting to the source of truth, we do definitely talk about what may be data quality issues. And from an informational perspective, being able to expose those to the teams that can work together and collaborate to resolve them is important.
Well, I mean, it is interesting to me. I mean, one of the things I discovered from the CIOs when I was talking to them about data catalog was that they felt that this was the place that people would discover the information. And obviously, hopefully we've educated them on quality, but there's so much that's been created in terms of reports, but the request model gets broken quick, right, Ellen? If you try and say, well, I'll just keep requesting more and more stuff.
Right, it does. Going beyond that, beyond just data quality, what the catalog enables is that discoverability. It is always, it's a pleasure to hear some of the reactions that we see with customers when they first start exploring the catalog about how they didn't know that we had that information in our organization, or we didn't realize that there was duplicative information, and that now they're aware that these are issues that they may need to resolve. Okay, sometimes those are exposed before, but sometimes that discovery process is there.
I think in some organizations I've seen, and when I first started out in similar, it was a bit like Fight Club. The first rule of data quality is you don't talk about data quality. And it was something that was like everybody said yes. We remember we've got issues, but it was brushed under the carpet a little bit, and we'll get round to that. But it doesn't go away, and it gets worse. And I think that surfacing it and putting it right in front of people and making them understand if there are issues there, what they are. It's all about trust using this data, and a lot of the times when people will turn back to their alternative data sources and dare I say, spreadsheets and the like, is because they have this element of, well, I'm not sure about that, I don't understand that, but I understand this safe place I have developed for myself. Hiding those issues isn't going to help. By exposing them and having them documented and fully transparency to say this is what there is, this is what you can understand, and obviously that informs people about the issues, and not only does it help them understand how they can trust that data, but also it can help feed back into that loop and improve that. Because if you keep singing with your fingers in your ears, la la la, don't worry about data quality, it's never going to get anywhere. So yeah, I'm all for front and center in your face, here's your data quality issues.
So we have a couple of questions, but I'm going to ask my final one, and then we'll turn to the questions from the group that's here. Oftentimes, it's really important to be able to share on successes. I read Randy Bean's book, Fail Fast, last summer, and it really told the story of a lot of companies who were achieving success here in terms of self-service. Ellen, can you tell us about, and you don't even need to mention the name of the company if you can't, but can you tell us about a couple success stories you've heard from our customers, what they've been able to achieve by getting this right?
In terms of self-service, just having, so in working with quite a number of our customers, some of the success stories are really around that data discoverability, right? When you have a consistent location for information and a source of truth for people to come and find consistent terminology, consistent definitions, and have it all be in a searchable, collaborative interface, that in and of itself is for many of our customers a big win, because so many times we have customers where they have disparate sets of data where they didn't necessarily know what was there. Just finding that discoverability aspect and having people be able to see duplicative data, that right there can be a win. And then to iterate and develop the processes to resolve those. Those are wins that we've seen as well. We've seen success around common vocabulary, easier flow of information, a reduced load on IT teams, In some ways, in many ways, easier governance of the data, less about command and control and more about providing people guidelines and information.
And Julie, I know you're early on your journey, but when you interviewed, you must have provided us with some insights to what would be your goals and achievements. So what are you trying to get to as you look at doing this for Elation?
Well, I think that there's a question that's actually come up, which is, what is self-service? And that quite often is the question. And I think I'm just actually very quickly, because I came up with my own definition, which I was going to quote back. But what is self-service? What do we actually mean by that? And I think there isn't one single answer, as I've mentioned. And my definition is that it's an approach to data analytics that enables users of varying roles and skills to independently access the correct data to support their needs. So that's why it's not one size fits all. That's why it's got to be different. Now, fundamental to that, the start of any of that is understanding what data you've got in the first place, the state it's in, and then thinking, what level of access, what level of skills are we going to be addressing here? Because different types of people are going to want different access. And so I see there being multiple different levels in terms of how people will do that. We've got, we use dashboards internally for people to be able to get high level information from there. For some people, that's not enough. They want to dive into that raw data and get to it. So we might use the Compose tool in Elation for them to be able to create their own queries and get that data out. But then there's other people who are sort of somewhere in between. So it's about finding the right levels there that we want to put in place, and creating an environment in there that allows them to access that data quickly and independently and trust it and want to do that. And there's challenges there, to be sure, both from a cultural perspective and a technical perspective, to make that data in a format and a way that can be readily accessed and readily queried without having to know, database designs and issues like chasms and fan traps or other things like that might lurk beneath. It's that side of it. So yeah, it's just to summarize that, it's a chameleon. There's lots of different ways in which it could look, and I know I'm going to have to address those different elements in different ways. But yeah.
So we have some good questions. I'm going to answer the first one because it has a very quick answer. This one's from Eric. There are 2 white papers on the Elation website that may be helpful to you on data governance. So I would just go look under the data governance page, and you should be able to find the 2 white papers that talk about how do you put data governance together. So with that, I'm going to switch to question number 2 from Rick, and it says, and I guess you guys can see this as well, but do you have any suggestions on phases or methodology in getting self-service? We have a leadership team for self-service, but then say come up with something. Self-service is a hot topic, but all have a different understanding of what self-service is. So how do you get that definition? I'm going to come back to you, Julie. How do you get everybody to define what it is together?
Well, it will mean different things to different people because, not everybody thinks the same way. And it has to be understood that this does mean different things. So getting the people together and saying, look, what does it mean to them individually if the different leadership perhaps are perceiving it in different ways, and workshop it and come up with something that is a common ground. And the likelihood is it will have different flavors into how it needs to be implemented. But a part of that will also come back to, if you can tie it onto a use case and say, well, what we mean for this particular use case in terms of business intelligence, what would self-service mean here, give something tangible, which would see benefits, then that will help articulate it and help sell why you're doing it that way. So yeah, trying to tie it into that as well. But there is no single way of doing self-service BI for sure. I wish there was. Make life a lot simpler for me. But
you could write a book. Ellen, any thoughts on that one?
I am in complete agreement with Julie that self-service may mean different things to different parts of the organization. One of the, it may be worth an exercise to dig into, and really focus in on what are the pain points, right? Rather than saying we're going to enable self-service, understanding what the business challenges are, and then kind of focusing on building your definition around that and solving those problems can be a helpful approach.
We got a similar question here about white papers. There is also a self-service page. It has some customer stories in it. And so take a look at that. And Rick, if you need any further help, send me a note and I'll be glad to help you there. This was the one area where I have to say we had more case studies than we knew how to put on the webpage. So there's some really good ones out there. And then another thing, again, I mentioned Randy Bean's book. I do not make any money from it, so to be clear, but it's a good book from the business point of view. So I think that might be interesting. Michelle asked that she's running into challenges selling data catalog to the engineering department. Now, I think part of the problem here, maybe she's selling it to the engineering department rather than the business itself, because that's really where the need lives. But what do you think, Julie? You've been around this a long time.
Yeah, your point about selling it to the engineering team. I mean, I joined a company a few years ago, and I joined to do business intelligence and do the data. And I sort of said to them, so if you got where's your schema diagrams? Oh, we don't have that. We don't need them. We know it. We'll let you reverse engineer something. And you had to go to the same people in engineering for the information about this data and everything. And there were several glossaries popped up about the systems, and everybody started. Well, I think everybody who joined started their own glossary because they had no idea where else to go, and to try and find this information. And the people who we were going to in the business, it was a very fast-growing business. There were only certain people who knew all of the parts to it and had the information. A lot of it was in their heads, but they were quite happy because they could get on and do what they needed to do. But they found themselves being dragged upon a lot. So they had what we would term SME fatigue, where they were constantly being asked the same things. One of the ways I'd sell it to engineering is saying, yes, but the people who are asking these questions to understand what data we have aren't you. We're trying to avoid them bothering you. This is somewhere where you can download your knowledge, download your information, and this whole other wealth of people will benefit from that. So and they can benefit too because they can have it back through into theirs. So that's one aspect I would think of in it is avoiding them having people asking them lots of questions all the time about what it is they've created. And
but it's going to solve a business problem. So
yeah, absolutely. And it's solving it for the business, but it's also that benefit from the engineering side of things too. People, I think, quite often forget that they think of the people who are accessing the information in the data catalog or something, and the people who are actually benefiting that way. But the side benefit is the people who aren't being, dare I say, pestered for those answers to those questions and the draw on their time. That is part of the package, really, I see.
Anything, Ellen, you'd add?
Yeah, so just just a restatement of that engineering is not your only stakeholder, but as a stakeholder, by reducing the load on engineering, that can give them some more time. And it's also, it may be beneficial for them in that there may be some learnings for them about how the data is being used, right? They may have a little bit more visibility into what goes on downstream, which can only be beneficial. But the engineering is typically not the only stakeholder. They are a stakeholder, and then I'm going to tie back to executive buy-in. Having the executive team say, "This is important. We need for you to provide your knowledge," can be really helpful in getting that there.
So this next question, and I think knowledge articles and things like that are important concepts here, but it's about getting the right information and documentation in. So what have you seen from successful folks, Ellen, to start with?
So when we think about an implementation, and we think about managing a catalog, there are some processes that we recommend that our customers follow. Part of, that is all ties back into the overall goals and the use cases. We like our customers to do an implementation based on Alation best practices with some design elements that help users find information quickly, but also based on your use cases, settle on the information and provide guidelines as to what you want to go in the catalog. So that's a thought exercise and a process exercise to be able to develop the catalog management processes to support this. You will want to think about and build out some guidelines for your users about what should be in the catalog and how they should use it. That can help avoid, and with the processes and the catalog management team engaged in that, your chief catalog steward, for example, engaged in that and making sure that the content meets these basic guidelines, that can help alleviate those problems.
So Julie, your team has got to have a lot of experience with this. I remember when I first started at Alation, they had these extra holidays last summer, and I couldn't figure out when they were. My wife kept complaining because I tell her on Friday, I just found out I had Friday off. So I went into the catalog of all things because we've used it for everything. And there were the holidays, whereas it's hard to traverse the HR sites and things like that. So how do you recommend people think about, from your team's experience, how far can they go with catalog and how should they implement it so it's easy to find stuff?
I think what Ella was saying is putting some thought in at the start in terms of, if you like, it's almost having a catalogue architect in terms of, okay, this is how we'll have glossaries, this is how we'll have articles, this is the type of content we'll have in there and what standards you expect that to have. We do have a lot of extra information in our installation of Alation, which is called AAA, Alation at Alation. And it's great. We're using it in that way because it's such a flexible tool set. However, the point in the question is quite right. Confluence and SharePoint and things like that. I've been there before. Now I've been in a company where we threaten to start a drinking game take a shot every time somebody says they're going to stand up a Confluence page for that. They can be victims of their own success. But one of the reasons for that is people generally implement it and go, hey, great, we've got this system, but they don't give people guidelines. They don't say to them, this is the sort of thing we should be putting in there. This is what we should not be putting in there. And that's something that's got to evolve alongside any tool set, I think, not just a data catalogue, is in terms of use, how are you going to interact with it? Yeah. So absolutely, we set up those guidelines in there. In terms of, where do you draw the line? I think it's a very, very wavy line, very, very flexible line in terms of what you're comfortable with. I think starting from the core purpose for it, anything to do with data, I think it should become the data hub for an organization. So if somebody's got a question about data, that is where they will go, be it what dashboard, what report do I need, what is the meaning of this term. That is that your jumping off point is the data catalog. So in that terms, I would say it's very much inclusive on there. There's other information that you can relate stuff to and place articles in there as well. So yeah, I think we use it quite heavily at Alation for additional information, as you say, like such as the holidays, etc., which could be regarded as data. It's very important data for your wife, Miles. But it depends on each organisation. I think you don't want people to run amok with it. There should be gatekeepers to information and stewards for that area of stuff, because it has got the potential to get out of hand. Sorry.
Yeah, and I'd like to put in a plug for Alation Professional Services. When you purchase a data catalog, it comes with a professional services engagement where we do these very things, right? We help you get up and running technically, but also from a business perspective. Think about what your implementation needs to look like. We help you build that out. It's not difficult, and Alation is easy to use. but going through the thought exercises of making sure that the information that you're presenting in the catalog meets the customer's needs, and that you are building the processes for the long-term success of the catalog management, the thinking about how you're going to be communicating information to your stakeholders, taking feedback and modifying your catalog and making sure that you've got appropriate controls in place. How do you roll it out to new teams? How do you expand? Those are things that we do as part of that initial implementation, or the right start engagement that comes when you purchase a data catalog, to get you started on this very track of driving for success.
And we have a final question, and I'll share some opinion on it, and then I'd love to get both of you to share. And it has to do with this thing called the data fabric, which is complex and difficult to understand. But I think for me, there's two really interesting ideas in a data fabric. One is that systems need to be open, because customers are going to try to put this kind of system and that kind of system up, and they need to be able to connect. And that's something that Alation spends a lot of time on. But the second is this notion of data ops. What's your process? And that kind of has a key element, which I think of as data governance. But, as you look at this term data fabric, what's involved from a methodology point of view? Do you see anything beyond the two components I've talked about? And Ellen, it looks like you're ready to answer.
I'm thinking about that question. I don't see so Alation as a data catalog is a very, very flexible tool. It enables business capabilities. It enables you to do things to help serve the business needs. We do like things to be open and accessible. So I look at Alation as not necessarily, it's compatible with a number of different methodologies. If you are if you're thinking about things from a data fabric perspective, having Alation where you've got information that is easily accessible and kind of, an additional metadata layer that absolutely fits, right? Alation is by definition, and the initial implementation is very open. I'm not sure if that answers the question.
Well, that's fine. Julie, any thoughts about data fabric? Have you dug in on this at all?
We know it's very much a hot topic, as is data mesh and the differences between them, and who's going to opt for which one, and etc. So it's very much comes up. It's not something we are ourselves looking at this point in time as we evolve things out. But I do, from what I'm, in the information I've had around it and the conversations I've had, it's the same. You're facing the same challenges. It's just another solution for those same challenges. And so it's, methodology wise and how a data catalog fits into it. I'd actually argue the data catalog is even more important in the way that sort of handles itself in there. So yeah, I don't see there being a huge difference. It's the same challenges, the same sorts of things you've got to look at. The human challenges definitely don't change. They're always there, and it's just a different technology and architecture you employ.
Yeah, I've talked to a couple of the Gartner analysts, and one of the things they've said to me is that their viewpoint on data fabric is not that there's a data fabric company, but rather that they're suggesting that these systems and approaches are going to be able to work together. That customers can put them together in an end-to-end solution. And there's more we'll be talking about soon on that front. But needless to say, we get it, and our technology has to be able to support customers, and that includes being a great ecosystem player as a company. Well, I don't see any further questions. And so I have been thrilled to do this with both of you. And it's great to have a show that we have data leaders and women who are data leaders at Alation. More on that. We do something annually around that. But thank you both for coming, and thank you everybody who's attended today.